Welcome to another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today, my guest is Andie Crosby, who's a seasoned business leader and passionate advocate for health and longevity. After decades leading marketing and brand development for companies like Nike, Apple, and Procter & Gamble, her focus shifted in her 40s when she experienced firsthand the impact of hormonal changes, inflammation, and the power of nutrition to transform health. A simple elimination diet revealed how profoundly food and lifestyle impacted her well-being, sparking a deep curiosity about health and healing. This led her to the Institute for Functional Medicine, where she became the first chief marketing officer. Over 10 years, Andie built IFM's marketing and partnerships teams, driving a 13-fold increase in practitioner education and advancing personalized systems-based care. Today, as president of Calroy Health Sciences, Andie leads innovation in cardiovascular and joint health. Her mission is to raise awareness of the vascular system's foundational role, not only in disease prevention, but also in longevity, brain health, and performance. She believes we have the tools to change the trajectory of our health span and empowers people to take control by asking the right questions. Love that. Andie brings a relatable, purpose-driven perspective on living longer, better, and embracing midlife as a powerful opportunity for health transformation. Welcome to the show, Andie.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here.
What an interesting bio. Very cool that you helped
Yeah,
IFM. I like hearing that. Yeah.
yeah. It was an incredible opportunity. As you mentioned, I'd been working in what I would call more traditional consumer packaged goods. And then I just got really interested when I turned 40 in health and wellness and understanding, well, what's going on with my body? Why is it not working the way it used to work when I was 30?
Yeah.
And so I kind of entered this really exciting phase of learning more about nutrition and my body and health and wellness. And as often happens, in midlife, we really search for purpose and ways to take our skill set and apply them in a way that has maybe more meaning or more impact on the world. And so I was really excited to work with the Institute for Functional Medicine and furthering access to functional and integrative medicine, which I think is just key to longevity.
Yeah. So that's how you kind of got involved in the healthcare industry. But what's your role today? So
Yeah,
you you're the president of Calroy Health Sciences. So tell us about
yeah. How
that.
did I get there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I worked for IFM, as I mentioned, for over 10 years. And in that role, I got to attend incredible conferences and listen to leaders in integrative medicine and longevity, David Perlmutter, Jeff Bland, Mark Hyman, talk about the foundations of health and wellness and talk about functional medicine. And so I really felt like I was very healthy as a human being. I was previously a collegiate athlete, so I was really familiar with the gym and lifting weights and working out and eating healthy and had good body comp. I just assumed that I was a healthy person. And at one of these conferences, I had an opportunity to do what's called a carotid intermediate thickness test.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's the ultrasound on your carotid artery, and that test will tell you if there's presence of plaque in your artery. It'll also look at that intermediate thickness, which is inflammation in your vessels,
And
and
that's
it'll
supposed to
give
be
you
reflective, right, of what's happening in your heart, right? Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So yes, what's happening here in the carotid artery, which is a major branching point. So, whenever you have that branch point and you've got blood kind of swirling around in those branch areas, these are areas where you're most likely to accumulate plaque. And yes, then you can kind of uh, assume the rest of your vascular system is representing based on what you see in the carotid intermediate thickness. So, a friend of mine who was about the same age did this test, and we were both like in our early 50s at the time, and he came back so excited that his vascular age was 35. And I thought, like, I'm going to bust his bubble because he does not work as hard as I do on my health and wellness. I'm going to do this test and I'm going to come back and I'm going to beat him with my vascular age. And what actually happened, which was really surprising to me, is that I actually had two plaque spots in my arteries. I had a significant amount of inflammation. My intermediate thickness, I was in the 92nd percentile, which is the worst
yeah.
percentile. It's not an A, that's a hard F.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
my vascular age was 69. And I was so shocked by this because no one in my family had any vascular health issues. There'd been no strokes, no heart attacks. There'd been no kind of familial history that made me even concerned about my cardiovascular health.
Lucky
And like
you
I
for
said,
getting this scan. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I was in the gym and eating well. And so it really prompted in me this question, like, how can this possibly happen? Like, how can this be going on
Mhm.
underneath the
Yep.
surface? And I have no idea. And so that kind of started me thinking about vascular health and getting more and more involved in it. And ultimately, when I left the Institute, I started a consulting company with some colleagues of mine called Ovation Lab, and Calroy became a client. Now I'm embedded in Calroy as president. But part of what led me to that was really trying to understand and discover what's happening in my cardiovascular
Mhm.
system. And most importantly, what can I actually do about it? So it was actually my friend whose vascular age was 32 who told me, God, I've been taking this product called Arterisol for about 6 months, and it's supposed to be really good for your vascular system. And he explained, the role of the endothelial glycocalyx to me. So I
So was
actually
he taking it before he got scanned?
he was taking it
Oh,
before he got
okay.
scanned. And
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is the crazy thing. We both have been scanned multiple times since that time. Um, the only thing that has really changed for me, I started taking arterisol.
Hmm.
And then Calvary came out with a second product called Vascanox that I think we'll talk about a little bit later. But I started supplementing my cardiovascular health. And then I also started doing more stress management work, more meditation, ensuring I was sleeping better because, we do, you and I, and I'm sure many of your listeners have stressful lives, stressful jobs, and stress plays a part in cardiovascular health. And so over the years, that first scan that I did was June of 2019. I was 51 years old with a 69 vascular age. I recently got it done in April, and I'm now 57, just turned 58, and my arterial age is 55. So I'm
Awesome. Yeah.
now upside down, so I'm getting younger, which
You're
is what,
gaining. Yes.
yeah,
I love that story. So let's talk
yeah.
about cardiovascular health. So specifically, why is cardiovascular health the number one longevity lever for women? And why is it so often ignored until it's too late?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question. And it's an exciting question because I think of all the things that can extend longevity, the cardiovascular health and paying attention to our cardiovascular health is the number one, as you said, lever to get there. And the reason is it's currently the number one cause of death. So, if we think about the vascular system, let's first of all step back and say you have 60,000 miles of blood vessels. This would stretch around the earth 2.5 times. And what do those blood vessels do? Like they're more than just tubes that deliver blood. They actually deliver the nutrients that our organs need, our systems need.
Hmm.
Hormones and oxygen throughout the body. They support your muscles, your nerves, every organ and system in the body. It removes toxins and waste. So it's a key regulator. It's actually a foundational regulator of overall health, right? So for women specifically, it's the number one and the number two cause of death. Why do I say one and two? Because heart disease is the number one cause of death, and stroke, which is
Mm.
a vascular disease, is the number two cause of death. So cardiovascular disease combined is more than double the mortality of any other cause, whether it's cancer, any type of cancer. So it really is the number one obstacle between where we are today and our longevity goals. So that's why I say it is so incredibly critical. And for women, specifically, I think it's even, I want to draw even more attention to cardiovascular health because women present differently than men in terms of cardiovascular issues. So we often think about like what are the signs of cardiovascular disease, like, or an incident is like a pain in the heart, lightheaded. Women actually have more microcirculation issues. So think cold fingers, cold hands, like cold toes, that kind of thing. So what we see is that, as I mentioned, cardiovascular disease kills more women than all other forms of cancer combined.
Wow.
Um, but it tends to not be something that women get checked. We do our breast exam on a yearly basis, but we don't often test our cardiovascular system.
Let's go there.
Yeah.
So what test do you recommend?
Yeah, it's a great question. And because I'm talking to a doctor, I also want to say one of the other things that I think is so critical for women to know in their 40s is that, and I know you're an expert in hormones, that perimenopausal, menopausal phase of life for women tends to be a time when cardiovascular risk increases pretty dramatically.
Sure.
So when you're thinking about your hormones and your hormone changes, you should also be thinking about how do I support the cardiovascular system?
Interesting you say that because yesterday I had a patient who came in whose primary care, interestingly, had put her on Reggie's Rice, a supplement for lowering cholesterol, which I was just shocked because usually primary cares aren't recommending supplements. But the patient was frustrated because her cholesterol had went up from February to June. And I just kept asking questions like, well, what else has changed? I mean, obviously she could have been on the wrong supplement. It could have been inferior. She got it like CVS or something. So it could have been
Yeah,
not a therapeutic potency, whatnot. But what was interesting to me was that she stopped cycling this year. So her estrogen had declined, right? She's not bleeding. And so I was explaining to her, well, maybe your cholesterol went up because as your hormones decline, your body produces more cholesterol because they're the backbone, they're the building block for hormones. So even though she was thinking she was intervening to, lower her cholesterol still went up on that supplement and she was frustrated. But I said, I think this is a product of perimenopause, like what you're saying, the body's
yeah,
natural response to the hormone shift. But that literally, would prove even to another conventional doc that perimenopause can increase that cardiovascular risk because that's when the shift is happening and cholesterol could be rising. I don't know if that's echoing what you're saying, but that was just a case yesterday that
yeah, no, I think that's very true. I saw my own cholesterol levels, which have been typically very, very low, increase. So
and we
I
know there's more to the story than cholesterol, but yes,
absolutely.
that's
Yeah,
what we're going to get into. Yeah.
absolutely. But it's
Yeah.
a sign or a part of the story. And I
Yeah.
think if we just think about in general, what are the things that we're looking for? Because you had asked, what tests can you do?
Yes,
And I
yes.
think this is the exciting phase that we're in with cardiovascular disease. It used to be, if we think back 20 years ago, it would be kind of, you wouldn't know that you had cardiovascular disease until you had an incident.
Mhm.
And here's where the roll of the dice comes in, right? Like the incident could be death. The incident may not be a warning sign. The incident for many people, the warning sign is actually
Yeah. Death.
right?
Yeah. Yes.
So, but we're now at a phase right now where we have many more from inexpensive to very thorough, more expensive diagnostics on cardiovascular health. So, we're in an exciting phase right now where diagnostics allow us to catch it early. And we'll talk about this too. Our knowledge of modifiable lifestyle factors that have a positive influence on cardiovascular disease has increased. Our access to dietary supplementation that's backed by clinical research that proves that it has a positive effect on cardiovascular health has increased. So I think 20 years ago, we would have said, well, that's the deck you've been dealt. You're going to get cardiovascular disease. Not a lot you can do about it. We're now at a place in where not only can we find it early, but we can actually treat and reverse cardiovascular disease, and that should be an empowering feeling.
And you're a walking testimony of that. Yes. So
Yeah,
let's go
yeah,
back to the test. So beyond a simple just lipid
yes,
panel, I talk a
yeah.
lot about this in my book, listeners know, in Your Longevity Blueprint in chapter 7, where I'm kind of comparing the plumbing system of our home to the cardiovascular system in the body, meaning you need clog-free plumbing. So
Yes.
I do talk about advanced cardiovascular lipid testing. And I think that's where you're going with this, but I want to hear your opinion. So
Yeah,
share.
I think
Yeah.
that's super
Yeah.
important. And I think that there are some other markers that I'm sure you look at in your practice. Inflammation markers
Yes.
are key, right? Like we know inflammation, oxidative stress are really like two critical triggers for cardiovascular disease. So, in the work that you're doing in your practice, I know you're looking at all of these sort of underlying factors that create the terrain for
Mhm.
cardiovascular disease, as well as the actual markers. And advanced lipid panels would be an example. And then there are several devices and diagnostic tools that we talked about. So I'm going to start with maybe one of the more exciting new innovations, and it's also on the more expensive scale. But like I said, a lot of your insurance covered panels that look at inflammation and look at lipids give you a really good idea of where you are. But something like a Clearly heart scan, that's Cleerly. This is a coronary CT angiogram test that has an AI overlay on it. So one of the issues that we've had with calcium scans in the past is that it just says yes or no, there's presence of calcium. And then
Which I
we
want
don't,
to talk about those too, but we'll stay on the clearly topic.
yeah, yeah. So if there is calcium in the actual vessel, that would be considered plaque, right? But what we don't know is how that calcium is classified. Is it vulnerable
Mhm.
calcium, and that's vulnerable plaque, and that's the plaque that's more likely to create issues, actually erupt. It's like the soft cap. The calcified cap is not as dangerous. The calcified cap is fairly stable. So, what the Clearly test does that's really exciting is that it characterizes the plaque that it's seeing in the vessel as soft vulnerable versus calcified. So, you get a better sense for what you're looking at in your CT angiogram with a Clearly. So, you have everything from that. You've got inexpensive devices that you can buy on Amazon. Smart Pulse is an example that looks at microcirculation.
Hmm.
So you want to have healthy microcirculation, as I mentioned, in the fingers and the toes, and that gives you a sense for elasticity of the vessel and the health of the microcirculation.
So what is
Um,
that? I haven't heard of that. Is that like a pulse ox or something that you're putting on your
yeah,
fingers to?
exactly. It looks
Okay.
like a pulse ox. You put it on the end of your finger, and one of our doctors, cardiologist by the name of Michael Twyman, he's a biohacker. He's always finding these cool new watches and devices that measure your blood pressure and measure your elasticity and microcirculation. So as you know, our smart health devices improve, we're getting more and more cardiovascular inputs. In fact, in my new Whoop, I can actually look at my blood pressure. So, and we talked about blood pressure. Gosh, talk about an inexpensive way of looking at the health of the cardiovascular system. Regularly measuring and looking at your blood pressure is super important and critical.
Sure. I'm gonna go back to the coronary calcification scan. So I do send patients for those if their advanced lipid testing, comes back that they're at very high risk or they have significant family history. Sometimes we just want to know like what are we working with here? So that is relatively inexpensive. Around here you can get it for like under 150 bucks and it basically is giving you a score. Maybe you can better describe this as to how much plaque you do have. So is that just looking at you're saying that doesn't differentiate soft or hard plaque. That's just looking at what calcium they see. But is that more hard actually? If it's calcium?
Yeah, I think the difficult thing is that, you might get a zero score
Yeah.
on your calcium score.
Which is
And
good. That's a
it's
good
clear-
that yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
would you think it's good, but then you get it clearly, and there's actually a significant amount of soft plaque that isn't picked up
Shoot.
regular. Yeah, yeah. So, there are lots of innovation that's happening right now in cardiovascular health. And I think this is what it's demonstrating, right? That we're learning about the need to really prioritize that identification of that soft plaque. Certainly, in an ideal world, you'd like to see no plaque in your blood vessels and arteries. But as Dr. Mark Houston says from the Hypertension Institute, they are starting to see plaque form in, embryos in children. So,
Mm.
it is a fact of life, and it is something that we are constantly looking at minimizing.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a personal question so we can edit this out. But have you had a clearly? Have you had any other advanced? Like, I'm just curious if they
I have
correlate with
not.
the CIMT. Okay.
I actually have not done it clearly. It is on my list of things to do in the next year. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to figure out who around here, how I could refer patients for that. That's another on my project list. Okay.
Where are you
In
located?
Iowa,
Okay.
Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Okay. I was gonna say, gosh, I know some people in Texas, but yeah, we'll
I've had a
find.
couple guests mention it, but yeah, I don't know locally. So yeah, listeners, I'm working on that. Okay. Um, so let's talk about nitric oxide. So how
Yeah.
important is that for longevity and cardiovascular health? Let's go there.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, if it's okay with you, I'd love to start with the glycocalyx
Oh,
before we
sure.
talk
Yes, we
about
get
it,
to that.
because that's
Yes.
kind of the, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's start with the glycocalyx because this is a really fun discovery, right?
That we haven't talked about a lot on the podcast. So my listeners are probably
Oh,
thinking, what the
good.
heck is this? What is
Yes. What is the glycocalyx? This will be a great little party topic. So, it used to be, again, I'm going back maybe 20 years. The conventional thinking was that the blood vessel is like a garden hose. And that the endothelium was kind of the inside of that garden hose. And you do know if you leave a garden hose out, a garden hose gets old, like it gets less pliable, it's stiffer, it starts to crack. So, in some ways, that does apply to the cardiovascular system. The older we get, the stiffer our vessels seem to be. But again, there are a lot of things we can do about that. But
And
the,
I have to interject here because also the back to the hormone shift that happens, right? Estrogen doesn't just help with vaginal dryness and
yeah,
elasticity in that department, right? It also helps with elasticity in the cardiovascular system. So all the more, reason why it's so important, in my opinion, I don't know if you agree, but to intervene and replace estrogen amongst other hormones earliest, possible. So
yeah, I love that point.
yeah.
Yes, thank you for making that. So, what we have discovered fairly recently, and I would say really in the last 10 years, it started to make its way from medical research to actual clinical application, is the importance of what's known as the endothelial glycocalyx. So, this is a gel-like structure that actually covers the endothelium, the inside of that vessel wall. And if you think about how would I describe, maybe the best way to describe the consistency of the glycocalyx is, have you ever picked up a fish after it comes out of the water? Or even
Yeah.
if you felt the surface of your eye when you're putting in your contacts or something, that kind of slimy layer, that's a sugar slime layer called a glycocalyx layer. So we have glycocalyx layers all over the body. Fish have them on the outside of their body. That's a protective layer. And we have it in the inside of our blood vessels, and it's called the endothelial glycocalyx. So think about this slimy layer. But what's really cool about it is that it's actually what we would call a smart barrier. So it doesn't just exist to keep things out and to keep that endothelial layer safe and safe from plaque buildup, for instance. It certainly does do that, but it also controls what makes it its way through the endothelial wall and into the tissue. So it's quite a sophisticated little layer. And I say it's little because if you layered 1,000 of them on top of each other, you would get the thickness of a piece of paper. So you can imagine how delicate and small it
Yeah,
is. And that's why, with the invent of better visual technology and microscopes, we've been able to even identify this layer.
sure.
So this layer is super critical. It protects that endothelial wall against disease. It keeps blood moving through the system swiftly. It controls, as I mentioned, what enters your tissues and controls the leakage. It also supports energy, immunity, and even skin health, right? So really, really critical layer. And we now know that this is ground zero for cardiovascular health. And what do I mean by that? You actually cannot have a healthy cardiovascular system if that tiny little slimy layer is is impacted, negatively impacted. So conversely, you can't have a healthy glycocalyx and an unhealthy cardiovascular system. Everything literally rides on that thin, delicate,
Delicate.
fragile layer, right? So that's exciting and also terrifying because it is fragile. But we know a lot more now than we ever used to know about that layer. And that's thanks in large part to the work that Calroy Health Sciences has been doing. We've spent 20 years researching this layer. We actually built a microfluidic chip that allows us to put human glycocalyx cells on a chip, and then we pulse blood over it with the same sort of velocity and that pulse back and forward that you get with a heartbeat. We're able to actually put substance on the glycocalyx cells and determine what degrades it. And we've also been able to determine what supports the health and growth of that layer. So that invention, which is patented, was really critical in helping us develop arterial as a product. So what do we know damages this layer? High blood sugar. So here's another great example. If you have a patient that walks into your office who's diabetic, has high blood sugar, a propensity for that, there's a very good chance that their glycocalyx layer is impacted by
Is
that.
damaged. Is this where we get the concept of leaky vessel? It's like
Absolutely.
how we talk about leaky gut in functional medicine, but probably what's unfortunately more risk inducing is this leaky vessel, as we're learning today. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So high blood sugar, even if you're not diabetic, is having an impact on that glycocalyx layer. High blood pressure, that will also impact the health. It'll shear off that glycocalyx layer. Processed foods, excess sugar, smoking, environmental toxins, and as I mentioned, sort of chronic stress and inflammation, which can sometimes go
Yeah.
hand in hand. So, the presence of any of that in a person's life would encourage me to say, like, oh, we need to look at your glycocalyx, we need to look at your cardiovascular health because all of these things combined will have a negative impact on vascular health. Now, we can now go to what
Mhm.
protects it, right?
Sure.
So, how do we keep that glycocalyx nice and healthy? There's so many things that are free that we can just do as part of our daily lifestyle. And I'm sure you're having these conversations with your patients, eating a diet rich with colorful fruits and vegetables. Dr. Deanna Minnick talks about the rainbow diet.
Hmm.
Getting those polyphenols from all these different color fruits and vegetables are
Yep.
really critical.
Yep.
Exercise, stress management, certainly our omega-3s, our fish oils are critical. We talked about restorative sleep and stress reduction. That was a really critical component that I had to add into my health routine. And then also, this is where something like our Tirasol comes in. So I mentioned we have that microfluidic chip that allows us to determine what degrades the glycocalyx. We can also then test different ingredients to see what actually rebuilds it. And what we
Repairs it. Sure.
found,
Yeah.
yeah, what we found is that there is a group of marine polysaccharides, otherwise known as seaweeds, that can be very effective in the rebuilding of the glycocalyx. And so we tested all different kinds of compounds, and we ultimately landed on a green seaweed. Um, this is not a test for anyone, but that green seaweed is called Monostroma nitidum. So it's wild caught by Calroy. We extract it ourselves, so we are able to really ensure the quality of the extraction process. That monostroma nitidum was able to take a degraded glycocalyx and rebuild it to 103% of normal in 24 hours.
Wow.
So we
Yeah.
know the product is very effective based on our cellular research, and we've since published human and animal studies that show that the product is very effective.
And of course,
So
I want to ask, how long does that last? Yeah.
yeah, it's a great question and a tough one because the glycocalyx is, as I mentioned, a fragile layer. So
And if we're constantly damaging it, we need to constantly be,
constantly
repair it.
damaging
Yeah.
it, we
Yeah.
need to constantly be rebuilding it, right? And you might have like one big birthday dinner where you have a big piece of cake and you're eating a lot of sugar at dinner or whatever, that will definitely have an impact on the glycocalyx. So the dosing for arterial is one
Mhm.
capsule in the morning and one in the evening. And again, it provides that kind of day-long support of the glycocalyx, which is a really dynamic, fragile and dynamic layer.
Sure.
So we do see the product begin to have an impact on the health of that glycocalyx relatively quickly.
Sounds like
Now,
it. Yeah.
yeah, we have blood pressure studies that show impact in blood pressure in about 3 months' time. We've looked at we have some published plaque studies that show 6 months, 9 months to 12 months, depending on the patient, we start to see some changes in that. In my case, I started to see a decrease in the intermedia thickness within about 6 months, but certainly it's taken a couple of years to actually get down to and below my own biological age.
I want to make sure I want to try to repeat this in layman's terms for the listeners. And
Yeah.
maybe you said this, but so obviously the seaweed can repair this endothelial glycocalyx like matrix, this thin, fragile little layer,
Mhm.
very quickly, it sounds like. But did you earlier make the connection that again I may have missed saying if this is intact, right, then we can't make plaque, and if it's not intact, if it's breaking down, is that when plaque sets in?
It is. It's
Okay,
really
okay.
critical that it almost looks like if you saw a photograph of it, it almost looks like a gel, like a fur coat layer. So it has this kind of like furry look to it, which is interesting considering how tiny it is.
Yeah.
Dr. Houston, from the Hypertension Institute, calls it a slimy fur coat barrier. So, but imagine these sort of dense hairs covered by a gel. That's what the glycocalyx looks like. So when those dense hairs are actually depleted, it begins to look sort of like a desert floor. You might have a couple of hairs stick up here, and then it just looks like open endothelium, a couple of hairs here. And that's where you can easily then begin to see how the endothelium can be insulted.
So is this seaweed, I guess, what differentiates your seaweed from other seaweed? Because obviously there are different seaweed products on the market. So tell
Yeah.
us why yours
Yeah.
is the best.
It's a great question. I think if you see other glycocalyx supplements on the market, they typically have what's called a fucoidan seaweed. This is a brown seaweed. In our studies, we found that the green seaweed was just much more effective on its own. So we actually did not see that level of increase in the glycocalyx that quickly with the brown seaweed. It's more commonly available.
Sure.
In some cases, and the thing to remember about fucoidan is there are several different versions of fucoidan. It's like a
Yeah.
daisy.
Yeah.
There are a million different
Yeah. Yeah.
daisies,
Yeah.
right? So the fucoidans that we tested just simply didn't perform as well as the green seaweed. And so it allows our product to include the monostorom, the green seaweed, and then we pair it with some select fruits and vegetables to provide that polyphenol
Sure.
spectrum that we talked about. So it works very effectively. It also has no contraindications, no safety issues because you're essentially eating plant matter.
Sure.
Dr. Joel Kahn, the cardiologist, calls it a smoothie in a capsule.
Yeah, so let me go back to that question where I asked, so how long does it last? And it sounds like there's a complicated answer. Maybe we don't know. But when I first learned about this product, which was years ago,
Yeah.
maybe I'm making this up. I thought it took like 60 or 90 days to repair it. And then I thought the results were, I mean, not lasting forever, but that they would last a while. And maybe that was just old news and we know more now, but I'll let you take
I
it.
think it's a dynamic layer. And so you can begin to make repairs to that glycocalyx layer relatively quickly. And when I say quickly, I'm going to say 2 months, right? You're going to start to see the health of the glycocalyx grow in a couple of months, but it's dynamic. And so, like our lives, you could have a high stress day. You could have be exposed to a toxin that you're not aware of. So it's constantly responding to the environment.
Sure.
So it's not like you rebuild it and you're like,
Good to
done.
go forever. Yeah. Yeah.
On.
Yep.
The truth of the matter is, like I said, it's a fragile yet resilient, but very dynamic layer. So it's constantly relating to the environment that we're presenting.
So the dose, I mean, for adults is one twice a day. Does that sound
One capsule twice a day.
sure?
Yeah.
And it sounds like that you said there's no contraindications. This doesn't interact with anything and no side effects. I mean, unless I guess it could lower your blood pressure. So if you were on a blood pressure medication, maybe we need to reduce that or just.
We actually haven't seen that
Oh,
because
okay.
we aren't artificially lowering your blood
Okay.
pressure. We're supporting the structure of a dynamic layer
Okay.
that knows how to modulate blood
Okay.
pressure.
Okay.
So we actually haven't seen a situation where tirasil could put someone into a hypo state from a blood pressure standpoint.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's tie in nitric oxide here.
Yeah, let's talk
So
about
now,
nitric oxide. So another cool thing about the glycocalyx, I kind of described these furry hair-like structures that are covered by a gel as kind of what the glycocalyx looks like. So imagine that you have blood kind of pulsing through your blood vessels. As the heart pumps, the blood moves forward and then it kind of pulls back a little bit, kind of like the sea, right? Or a wave on the sea. It's a forward back motion, and constantly marching forward. So it's that kind of sheer stress on the glycocalyx that triggers the production of nitric oxide in the blood vessels. So, having a healthy glycocalyx will help your body produce more nitric oxide
okay.
in that particular pathway. There's also a second pathway. So, nitric oxide can be produced either through the blood vessels or through the oral gut pathway. So there are two different ways that our body produces nitric oxide. What is exciting about nitric oxide, just to talk about what it is, it actually, the people who identified nitric oxide actually won the Nobel Prize for the identification of this as being a critical life molecule. It's really critical for us. And so, what does nitric oxide do? Well, first of all, nitric oxide is a gas. It's a gas that your body naturally produces. It's a really dynamic gas. So it is produced quickly and it dissipates quickly. So what it does is it helps with vasodilation. What does that mean? It makes your blood vessels more pliable, right? So it dilates the vessels so that the blood can move more effectively through the system. So it improves blood flow, plain and simply. It can lower your blood pressure. It boosts energy and stamina because you're getting that healthy oxygen and nutrients to all of your organs in the body. It supports sexual health because what is an erection other than blood flow to the penis, right? And it promotes better nutrient delivery and overall cellular repair. So it is literally critical to the body. Now, what happens is by the time you hit your 40s or 50s, your natural nitric oxide production is declining. It can drop by as much as 50% by the time you turn 60.
Wow.
So, we've been doing this fun little thing when we go to conferences where we have these nitric oxide salivary strips.
Oh, I've tested mine several times. Yeah.
Yeah, it allows you to just in 5 seconds for, I don't know,
hmm
maybe 50 cents a strip, it allows you to test your nitric oxide level.
hmm
And
hmm
we're looking at your salivary nitric oxide level, and which is proven to have good, that salivary level is a good general cheap marker for nitric oxide. There are ways you can test it through the blood as well, but salivary is super quick and easy. So when your nitric oxide is decreased or impacted, what happens? You tend to experience fatigue. You can experience brain fog, poor circulation,
Yeah.
cold hands and feet. Um,
Erectile dysfunction. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, decreased physical performance or recovery, sexual performance. So that healthy glycocalyx is really critical to that pathway's production of nitric
Sure.
oxide. And then you also have your salivary to gut pathway as well to produce nitric oxide. So your body is kind of built in. It's such a critical gas to the body that it's built in two different pathways for the production of nitric oxide.
Now, a lot of those companies that that are out there that recommend you test. Like I used to have every male that came in who had, reported ED, test his level because I basically they're all low. I mean, they're pretty much all low in nitric oxide, but I
Yeah.
used to like
Yeah.
to prove to them, yeah, see the level of pink on this strip? Yeah, you're low. A lot of those companies who recommend testing advocate for supplements to boost nitric oxide. Are you in
Right.
favor of those? I know you're saying more directly, let's fix the endothelial glycocalyx so
Yes.
your body can produce more nitric oxide, but are
Yeah.
you also in favor of some nitric oxide boosting products?
Yes. Asterisk. Let's talk about the asterisk. I am. I'm absolutely in favor of supplementation. I mean, I'm a president of a dietary supplement company. I think our philosophy is, when we are producing products and we have a very small product portfolio because we're always looking for areas where other people aren't addressing really critical and foundational areas. In the case of arterial, no one was talking about the glycocalyx. So we went there. We do have a nitric oxide product called Vascanox, Fascanox. Vascanox is our nitric oxide product. And the only reason we developed it is because we knew that even if you had a healthy glycocalyx, you may still not be producing enough nitric oxide, which we know to be true, especially as you age. The issue that we found with many of the products on the market is that when you just artificially introduce a nitrate or a nitrite, that gets converted to nitric oxide really quickly. It'll raise your nitric oxide levels, but then they'll fall pretty quickly. So the best product that we tested on the market lasted for 8 hours. So you could take that product, your nitric oxide levels would increase, and then they would dip below the therapeutic threshold at around the 8 hour mark. Well, we need nitric oxide 24 hours a day. And most of us don't want to be popping nitric oxide
Every
three,
eight
four
hours.
times
Yeah,
a
yeah,
day
yeah.
to get there, especially if you're looking at people that are using nitric oxide to support healthy blood pressure.
Mhm.
That's critical in the evening. And so if you're just taking your nitric oxide in the morning, you're not
You're
going to
not
get
getting
it.
24-hour control. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you take your nitric oxide in the morning, you do your workout in the afternoon, you're not getting the recovery effects of that nitric oxide. So we were on a mission to, much in the same way that our Tiracell as a product exists to support the body's own functions and structure, we wanted to come up with a nitric oxide product that supports the body's own capacity to store and trigger the release of nitric oxide as needed. So, what we did with Vascanox is we set out to develop a formula that worked for 24 hours on a single dose. So, we have published human studies that show that 2 capsules in the morning will get you above the therapeutic threshold for 24 hours.
Wow.
And that your morning levels actually get healthier and healthier as you take the product over a 1 month basis. So the two products work really, really well together. If you're taking arterisol and you still test low for nitric oxide, you can supplement with Vascanox. You might find after you've taken arterisol for 3, 6 months or so that you're either creating enough nitric oxide that you don't need Vascanox, or maybe you only need 1 capsule of
Sure.
Vascanox.
And what are the main
So,
ingredients in the Vascanox?
yeah, it's a great question. So, the core ingredient in Vascanox is actually a black garlic. And that black garlic provides the precursor that the body needs to develop hydrogen sulfide, which is a stabilizing companion gas to nitric oxide. So we're kind of using this hydrogen sulfide as a backdoor way of supporting and providing some stability to nitric oxide so that it supports the body's own kind of storage and release mechanism.
Awesome. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so if a woman listening wants to start protecting her vascular health today, what are maybe the first two or three simple science-backed steps you recommend? Obviously, we're recommending arterisol and Vascanox, but what are some
Sure.
other
Yeah.
steps you can take?
I would just recommend if you're not already working with someone who has more of a root cause mentality, and I'm talking about your practitioner. So, find a clinician who's going to pull the right panels for you, do the right cardiovascular testing. Certainly at age 40 and 50 is a milestone. I would be doing some deeper testing around my cardiovascular health. Maybe consider getting a CIMT, a carotid intermediate thickness test. There's a company called Vasolabs, Vasolabs. They did my test for me. They travel all around the country and different practices, and you can get that test. It's relatively inexpensive, less than I think a couple $100s. If you're a clinician, they will bring technicians into your office. You can set it up with your patients and run 20 patients through a day. So get a clear assessment. Look at not just your cardiovascular and your lipid markers, but look at markers like inflammation. Look at the things that are sort of the underlying cause of cardiovascular disease. So get that assessment, number one. Number two, take care of the modifiable lifestyle factors that I know you talk about all the time on your podcast. Eat healthy, really manage your stress, consider meditation, consider journaling if stress is an issue for you in your life. Find some sort of outlet for that. Movement and exercise is critical. Really, monitoring your blood sugar level is key.
And what's the exercise nitric oxide relationship? So does exercise, because it's moving, blood
Yeah, great
through, is it
question.
increasing nitric oxide?
Nitric oxide is incredible for nitric oxide for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it's a vasodilator. So while you are working out, you're getting optimal blood
Yep.
flow. So what we found in our tests is that it will actually increase your VO2 max. So it'll increase your cardiovascular capacity when you're in the moment of exercise. But for me, as I get older, what is important to me is more the recovery side of it. So, what we find when you have healthy levels of nitric oxide is that you recover. Let's say you did a VO2 max test, or you did a run, or you did something that required a lot of cardiovascular capacity, you're recovering faster. In the 1 minute mark, the 2 minute mark, your heart rate is decreasing faster. So you're in a state of recovery faster. Then we actually find because you've optimized blood flow to the muscles that the actual muscle recovery post exercise is optimized. So imagine that you're feeling less sore. The muscle is more able to recover for future workouts. So it's actually really, really critical from a performance standpoint.
Let me go back to testing. So with this Vascanox product, have you taken it and tested your nitric oxide and then tested it like 12 and
Oh yeah.
24 hours later? And do you see nitric oxide
Yeah.
just light up the strip? Like,
Yeah, what I actually recommend people do, and I recommend that clinicians do this in the office. These little strips, like I
yeah.
said, they're super inexpensive. Test it. I'm going to say 70% of people over the age of 40 are going to test deficient on those nitric oxide strips. So what I recommend everyone do is do your test. If you are deficient, then you would take Vascanox. And what I recommend is you test yourself throughout the day every couple of hours and just note, like, okay, your nitric
Mhm.
oxide level has grown. You'll see in about an hour and a half, you're going to, I call it pink up the strip because the pinker the strip, the
Better.
better
Yeah.
in terms of your nitric oxide. So you want to be kind of a raspberry pink on this strip that we use. So you'll get raspberry pink on the strip, and then you see that you stay in that healthy pink level all day long, and then test yourself when you wake up in the morning. And what you'll find is for me, I'm a very low nitric oxide producer. Even though I've been on arterial for 5 years, I take Baskin every day. Once I started taking it that first month, I found that I'd wake up in the morning and my morning levels would be slightly pinker every single day. So now when I wake up, I have kind of a moderate pink reading on the salivary strips. So that indicates to me that like I had a nice healthy
You're
level of
still in good shape.
oxide
Yeah. Yeah.
overnight. I'm still in pretty good shape and I take my next dose for the next day. So for me, it's something, and I'm also a very active person. So I push myself a lot in the gym. So I am looking for performance optimization. So yeah, I take Vascanox every day.
Obviously, you've made strides on your scan you shared. Do you feel better just in general? Like if you reflect back to 10 years ago, do you feel better?
I really do. And I think the big thing that I've noticed for me is I don't have that 3 or 4 o'clock energy dip that I used to get. My skin and my hair, I think, look better than they have in the last 10 years. So that's a nice little
Yeah.
side benefit of having healthy circulation. And then also, I think for me, I one of the things that I learned in this process that I think is so critical is that the circulation, the circulatory system, we don't feel. It's not designed for us to feel it unless we either put it under stress, we're working out, we're breathing hard, we can feel our heartbeat, or we're in distress, right? And so someone said this to me the other day, which I thought was perfect, was we're all very concerned about brain health as we age. We want to maintain our cognition.
Mhm.
We don't wait until we start forgetting things before we start to take care of our brain. I think I just would like to apply that same carefulness to the vascular system. Don't wait for a warning sign before you start to proactively take care of the singular most important system that your body relies on.
Yeah. Mic drop. That was great.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Let me go back to your scan also. So I don't remember how many months you said. Are you saying that it usually will take 6 months to see regression on
yeah.
the,
In an ideal world, I would do a CIMT, a carotid intermediate thickness test every six
six
months.
months? Okay.
That's what I try to do for myself because it just gives me, again, it's inexpensive and it gives me a really good idea of where's my trajectory.
Sure.
Am I seeing more inflammation in that intermedia, or am I actually decreasing inflammation? So
Yeah.
for me in my life, like I'm in an anti-inflammatory pathway. Like I'm doing as much as I possibly can to minimize inflammation.
Awesome. I want to come back to also, again, contraindication. So, is there anyone who shouldn't take arterisol? Is it just maybe children or
It's a great question. Arterisol is, we've had no safety concerns, contraindications. We do recommend because
pregnancy, lactation? Do we
we
know?
have not done a study with pregnant women. That is a very expensive undertaking. We do, however, have case studies of OBGYN clinicians who put their pregnant patients on it and find that it seems to really help with the placenta. But again, there's no study there. So, just from a safety standpoint, I would just say if you're pregnant, just please talk to your doctor, show
Sure.
them the ingredients, and just make an informed decision with your clinician. In terms of Vasconox, there are some areas that we would recommend that people use Vasconox with care. So if you're currently on a blood pressure medication, we recommend that you work very closely with your clinician. If you're going to use Vasconox, Vasconox is very safe. In the blood pressure study that we did, it did not take people into a low blood pressure zone, but when it's paired with a medication, the medication may actually do that.
Yeah,
So
sure.
if you're using both, just make sure that you're monitoring your blood pressure, you're reporting back to your clinician. There might need to be some modulation of medications there, so just work very closely with your clinician. And finally, if you're using a PDE5 inhibitor like a Cialis, a Viagra, again, just recommend that you use with caution because this product acts in much the same way. So too much of something can be too much, right? So just be careful with that. Maybe you skip your Cialis or you skip your Viagra or even see if you need it
Yep.
after you've been using Vasconox for some time.
Good tips. Lots of good tips. Anything else you want to share you haven't been able to share yet?
No, I think, well, actually, yes. I'm going to change my answer to yes. I mentioned to you that Calroy is a company. We have a very small product line, and we're really looking at holes that exist in the industry that we can feel like we can have a big impact on. One of the exciting areas that we're working on right now is joint health. So, joint health is very closely correlated to cardiovascular health, right? So, people who have cardiovascular issues tend to have joint issues and vice versa. Why? Because inflammation is an underlying driver for each one of those things. So we recently have launched a new joint product that has some really, really exciting science behind it. And that product is called Cardiogenics. So if you visit our website, calroy.com, calroy.com, in addition to seeing arterial and vascular, you'll see that product. And maybe someday we can come back and talk about this intersection of joint health and cardiovascular.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay. Well, you already
Yeah.
told us the website, but tell us where listeners can find you.
Yes. So please join us on calroy.com/Stephanie. There's a special landing page for your listeners, and they'll get 10% off of all products. And if they buy a bundle, that could be a bundle of arterial and Vascanox or a 3 month supply of any one product, we'll send you a free bag of oral microbiome gum. So this is a really fun
That's
plant-based.
fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we've come up with this gum that just really helps with the oral microbiome, which we know, again, there's a big connection between oral microbiome and cardiovascular health. But it's a fun little, I chew a piece every day after lunch, and I think your listeners will enjoy it. So please enjoy a free bag on us. And again, that's Calroy, calroy.com/Stephanie.
Wonderful. And of course, we'll put that link in the show notes. And listeners, we do have our tier cell on the shelf, and it sounds like we need to get the other two on the shelf as well. So we'll be working on that. Okay, last
Excellent.
but not least, Andie, tell me your top longevity tip.
Oh gosh, well, I'm just going to say inflammation. Manage your inflammation.
Mhm.
Really take a close look at what you're doing in your day-to-day life that's contributing it and do as much as you possibly can to decrease that. I think as you age, lowering inflammation and just being really conscious of it will have downstream effect on cognitive health, on cardiovascular health, on joint health. So I just think that's critical.
Great. Interestingly, no one has said that in over 200 episodes. So yeah, good tips. And start early also.
Yes, start early.
Well, thanks, Andie, so much for coming on the show today and sharing your passion for health and longevity, specifically sharing the benefits of the endothelial glycocalyx, which is a mouthful, and why we need to protect and really rebuild it. So this was very powerful and potentially one of the most powerful episodes we've had when we think cardiovascular disease is the number one leading cause of death, right? Super
Right.
important. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.